Happy Monday, folks. It was a long weekend for moi. Once a year, Russ, I have some friends who live downstate New York, and I go visit them, and always take that opportunity to go to Yankee Stadium for a game, as you can see from the shirt that I'm wearing. And it was a good game in the sense that the Yankees won, but it was really, New York in August, like going to DC in August, is probably the worst time to go.
Yeah.
It is oppressively hot, and I thought I did a good job in terms of seat placement when it came to, where to sit. Usually, first base for Yankee Stadium. For those who don't know, first base line, right field, if you're on the lower deck, is in the shade.
Right.
But at a certain point, it goes from shade to sunlight as the sun is, because the game starts at 1:00, the sun is going west or east to west in the sky. And for the first 3 or 4 innings, there was some cloud cover and it was pretty decent. And then the sun appeared over the right field upper deck, and I got absolutely baked. And I had 2 innings of that, and I was ready to walk around in the shade underneath the overhang and have a few beverages to cool myself off.
I'm sure it gets hot, man. I mean, I didn't even sit in my seats the other day in Philly last week. Didn't even do it.
And that's the nice thing about and most stadiums now have it. You have the ring completely going around the stadium at the lower level, at the 100 level, and you can walk around. And most places you can stand and watch the game. I have to say that obviously it was a hot day, and a lot of people had the same idea that I did. But they have lined off sections behind the handicaps areas and other areas near concessions where people can stand. And if you stand 1 inch outside that area, they tell you to move.
Right.
So they don't want anybody clogging up any area there.
No, but in Philly, they added rows of standing room in the 100 level where you could bring something to eat, and there's a little area, like a table, but it's a long one, like at a bar, and they had 2 of those. So there's a lot of room for people that just want to do that and stay out of the sun. So Yankee Stadium should do that, but they probably don't want it.
Now, here's switching to the world of music before we talk about hockey. Here are 2 things that make me feel old, and I am, but I don't need to be made to feel that way. One, I'm going along this morning at our local supermarket, and they have the Muzak playing, and usually it's just sort of nondescript, 70s pop, 80s pop, like Dan Fogelberg or something like. And I'm listening, and all of a sudden I'm hearing Big Balls by AC/DC. And don't get me wrong, I love it. It's great. But I'm like, wow, the parental controls have been let off here. And I'm like, what? And I posted that on Facebook, and I just got some, some thumbs ups, but just a little bit of a surprise that would be on the music there.
Obviously, Wegmans is a little more progressive. And it's sad that AC/DC has turned into Muzak. So,
Bon Scott AC/DC.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that today is the 70th birthday of Robert Plant. Now, obviously, Zeppelin broke in the late 60s, post British invasion, second generation, they were the new Yardbirds, and had a long career with Zeppelin until John Bonham died in, I think, 1980. And then he broke out as a solo artist. And he's just been, he is, I think, one of the preeminent frontmen. But I got into this discussion with a friend of mine, not even realizing that Robert Plant's birthday was today. We were discussing the upcoming Freddie Mercury biopic that's happening. And everybody just assumes now that, and I agree with it, that Freddie Mercury was the best, quote, frontman in rock. I don't think there's any argument there, but the question is the number 2. And like when I think of, the next level, it's Daltrey and it's Plant and
Mhm.
I guess, but even though Paul McCartney wasn't out there in terms of like being just on a mic, I guess you'd have to consider him the front man because he was the singer. But who is that number 2 behind Freddie Mercury?
It's a good question. I wouldn't put Plant. I think Plant's pretty great, but he's got his shortcomings too. I'm trying to think if we really had to put a number 2. I probably would be Daltrey.
Yeah, I think I mean, and this is just sort of, the Who were very. I mean, Keith Moon destroyed his drum kit. Pete Townsend destroyed his guitar. And remember, like even at an advanced age, I don't remember many other people doing the acrobatics that Daltrey did with the microphone. I mean, he used to flip that thing out to the crowd and pull it back in. And you can say that's nothing, but I honestly, I thought it was quite entertaining. And I'm sure that one time he probably hit somebody in the crowd by accident. But
yeah, the one thing about the Zeppelin thing was they had that short-lived XYZ band, which was Page, Squire, and Alan White, and they kept trying to get Robert Plant to join, and he didn't. And so the project never happened. I would have liked to have seen that, and I think a lot of people would have. And it got written about quite a bit, and once in a while somebody shows the YouTubes of that, and because you could hear the little bit of the sessions, and there's some pretty good music there. I kind of wish that would have happened. But as far as Zeppelin, look, at this point they don't create new music.
No,
I think it's fine if they get back together for a 50th. Hey, why not? Yes is doing it. They did tour with Yes one time. I think actually
Zeppelin and Yes. Wow.
Yeah, I think there are a few shows. I got to try and find it. But, you like them or you hate them. I always liked them, but I don't have them on my iPod. I know all their songs.
Yeah.
I was going to go see them for the In Through the Outdoor tour because I was about 17 at the time. And then, like you said, the John Bonham thing happened. So, I saw the at Live Aid, when they all got together and, Robert Plant dropped the songbook right in front of his feet because he didn't know all the words. So, but on that night, he was still really good. And he's had moments over the years where he's been really good. So we give him his due.
Yeah. And I think one of the previous tours he was supposed to play, like one of the previous tours with Zeppelin was canceled because I think one of his a child died. So he was supposed to come to Buffalo. They were supposed to come to Buffalo a couple times, and they ended up not coming because of those instances.
Because they didn't want to go to Buffalo.
No, no. He did tour here as a solo artist, and I believe that tour Phil Collins played drums there on that tour. So, and he produced a couple of his albums. So, so happy 70th birthday to Robert Plant. Let's start the show. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, August 20th, 2018.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Slow news day today, so we'll be taking your questions in the latter half of the show. So in the YouTube or even on Twitter, I think I'm fairly sure I mentioned it, but if not, if you want to send us a tweet, go ahead. If not, go into the YouTube chat, which you can go into by clicking on the YouTube in the on the window in the blog. And just on the right of the screen, there's a chat, and you can enter in, and Russ will read off your question. Couple interesting items here. We didn't have a show on Friday. There's been the line of demarcation from 1-year contracts to PTOs is starting, and it's not surprising. And there's been a couple in the last 72 hours I think are interesting. First one was Mark Letestu signing a PTO with the Florida Panthers. And if you ask anybody, and this is the thing that's weird, if you ask anybody what the area of strength is for the Florida Panthers, it's up the middle. And Letestu's a center. So you've got, he can play the wing, but last year in Edmonton and Columbus, he was primarily used as a fourth line center, and they're strong with Barkov, with Trocheck, Bukestad can play center. I mean, yes, they can move him to the wing, and that wouldn't be a bad thing, and he probably can adapt to that, or it can play that. But, he looks. I know that he has something left because I think he played pretty well in Columbus. But there are a lot of wingers out there, Russ, and that's where Florida seems to have a little bit of a weakness.
Yeah, I think they'll put him on the wing, or somebody else will play wing and he'll play center, one way or the other. But I think it's good to get a guy that's versatile like Letestu, and I think there's still some speed there. He can win some faceoffs. Even as a even if he plays the wing, you still might use him for faceoffs, right? I mean,
yeah, it was I think he's over 50% as a faceoff guy. So
yeah,
but
something there. I think that's a good pickup for Florida, and I think it does show you now that Florida thinks they have a really good team, and now they're just sort of fine tuning it. Where in previous years they'd be looking, probably for more than just like little spare parts.
Now, here's one I don't get, because I don't think their area of weakness is up front. It's on the blue line. The Edmonton Oilers gave a PTO to Scotty Upshaw, and on the they're with the injury to Sakara, who it sounds like he's going to be out a long time, and the fact that Darnell Nurse is an RFA now, they'll probably get Nurse done. I mean, Nurse now has the advantage in terms of the fact that Edmonton now is shorthanded on the blue line, and they need him. There can't be a long holdout here in this instance, and we'll talk about the holdouts in a second. But I don't understand the purpose of Upshaw unless they think he, is an improvement over somebody who's going to be a fourth liner on that team.
Well, I mean, he's got speed. He's been getting 18, 19 points a year, and it looks like that's enough now to sort of keep you in the NHL. He's a good guy. People like him in the room. So, Scotty Upshaw does have a worth. This also does show you where Edmonton is at, though, too. Like they seem like a team that not only is incomplete, but desperate to get a little more scoring and any way they can.
Well, I mean, is this a sign that like maybe some of the youngsters that, like maybe they keep Kailer Yamamoto at a low? I'm not saying Upshaw would be taking Yamamoto's spot, but I'm saying they're adding veteran versatile depth, guys who can play, one wing or the other, guys who could fill in up the middle. And I don't think Upshaw can play the middle, but what I'm saying is they're adding a veteran body that they would prefer to use as either a fourth liner or as that extra forward than keeping up a youngster. And I get that, but I mean, after, I think Yamamoto is an NHLer. I don't know if it's this year. Maybe they don't want to rush him. That would sort of be, the going counter to what Edmonton has done over the last few years. But I mean, maybe that's the purpose of the signing.
Maybe. I mean, so you think it's, I mean, it could be the reason. I really don't know. I mean, if you're asking me what the game plan is of Edmonton, I will tell you I really don't know at this point. Like, this is a team that I don't even know what's going to happen if they don't look like a playoff team. Like, it could be a really bad year for them if it goes that way.
Well, and this makes more sense. Reported a rumor yesterday regarding Alexei Emelin, and I mean, with losing a veteran defenseman in Sakara. Now, granted, Emelin is not anywhere close to being the offensive defenseman that he is, that Sakara is. But I mean, he could fit in, and he did fit in last year in a bottom pairing role with Nashville. And if you add him and somebody else steps up, like Matthew Benning or somebody like that who could step up into an offensive role, then that's a signing, that's a PTO that might make a lot of sense for the Oilers.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a lot of PTOs that would make sense for the Oilers. Like, it's just like, I feel like that's a team that's going to invite in more than most, because I do think that they're in trouble. They're in a little bit of trouble.
Now, just ask about the two teams the three teams that we cover. First, the Flyers. I mean, they're in a position right now where they've got young defense, so I don't see them bringing in a veteran defenseman on a PTO. But they might be in a position to bring in a forward.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in goaltending, I think they're waiting for Carter Hart, and they've got enough goaltending, or at least if they stay healthy. So, do you think if there is a PTO, it would be up front for the Flyers?
Yeah, I think it would be, someone like Nick Shore, someone who could play 3C role if they feel like Jordan Wheel doesn't look or won't be ready to play 3C. Maybe, a few days into camp, something like that happens. That wouldn't shock me. I think that would be a way of, not only making an upgrade, but just saying, okay, this is, one change that could really help us this season. And at least Shore has better wheels than Filppula did last year. Because, like I said, Filppula would get better scoring chances on the penalty kill than he would 5-on-5.
Yeah, and in the case of Toronto, I mean, they're loaded up the middle, obviously at the top three with Matthews, Tavares, and Kadri. But fourth line right now is a battle between Josh Juris, Par Lindholm, who played in the SHL last year, and Freddie Gauthier, who in 2 stints in the NHL really hasn't shown a lot. So obviously, if there is a defenseman out there, they might invite them on a PTO, a guy like a Toby Enstrom or Kevin Bieksa. Bieksa makes a lot of sense because he's right-handed. And there is very little toughness and pushback on the Leafs, and Bieksa is a sort of a physical defenseman. He's set 37, he's slowing down, but we're talking about a guy who would be a 7th defenseman. So that might be, but in terms of centers, there's, Daniel Winnick, there's Antoine Vermette. I mean, these are guys I could see the Leafs potentially putting an invite out there for. Another one, and you'll love this one, and I know that the analytics crowd has their pom-poms out for Cody Franzen.
Yeah.
And there was talk about Cody Franzen signing with the Leafs last year. He was sort of lobbying for a job, saying he'd love to come back to Toronto, and he signed with Chicago because they gave him a spot on the roster, and then he played, I think, 20 games and finished the year in Rockford. So I don't know if his window is closed at 30 years old, but I could see the Leafs going 2 directions, and it's possible that they could, they're very tight up against the 50 contract limit, but I think there's a possibility because there's no commitment there with the PTO. They could just let the guy come in, try to show off, and if he does make an impression, then maybe they can make a move to open up a spot to add that player. What about the Rangers? I mean, with the Rangers, they're in that.
I think they're in a spot like Tokarski, makes sense, right? They just makes sense from a standpoint that Georgiev, hey, he may not be up to the task. And Mazinek, well, he's floated around the last couple of years. So at least Tokarski had a solid year last year with Lehigh. So now they got 3 guys to potentially back up Lundqvist. Most likely Tokarski's the long shot. He'll probably be the guy in Hartford, but you don't know. And so, they wanted to at least do that. And it's not so much to compete. It's just to take the load off of Lundqvist. So he's not having to go out there too much, because I still think they're thinking about next year when they can actually compete if they make some moves in the free agency. So right now, that's a smart move. I think that's the only thing you'll see them do unless there's a major injury. But they still, again, I don't know how much better you want to make them this year when they're probably looking to get into the Jack Hughes sweepstakes.
Yeah, news of a signing. One of the first-round picks from this year was just signed. Ty Smith, defenseman, picked 17th overall by the New Jersey Devils, signed his 3-year entry-level deal. Russ, what can you tell us about Ty Smith?
Ty Smith is really an unheralded guy. He had a lot of points. He had as many points as the top guys that we will talk about in this draft for a long time. He's great on the power play. He might be better 5-on-5, defensively than some of the other guys that went ahead of him. Definitely better than Boquist. Mm-hmm. And so that's something where I think the Devils got great value. When I spoke to Smith at the Combine, he was a guy that was like, he didn't want to say it. I said it for him, but that was getting overlooked and wasn't getting credit for the kind of player he was. And I think now the Devils got themselves a real value. I think, the same way where you looked at like Brian Rafalski and said, this guy's 5'11", Rafalski was around that same thing, right? Rafalski turned into a hell of a player, and I think Ty Smith's going to do the same. I mean, just as an example, last year he had 73 points and was a point a game in the playoffs. 73 points. That's more than a point a game as a defenseman. He didn't get that much fanfare at the draft.
Yeah, no, I mean it was all Boquist, it was Merkley, it was those were the big names. I mean there were others, of course, but
I'll take him over Merkley every day of the week.
Yeah, well, I mean you and I both know. I mean it's been talked about ad nauseum about the risk. I mean, and we understand why San Jose took that risk because Merkley has the possibility, he has the tools to be maybe I don't know about top pairing because there are people who criticize his defensive ability, but his offensive chops, his skating.
Yeah, I don't think he'll ever be top pairing because I don't think the defense will ever get solid enough for San Jose Sharks to do that. Right. Plus, Vlasic will be there for a few more years. Remember how young he was.
Yeah, but I mean, to make Merkley less of a liability behind in his own zone, they may have to pair him with a guy like Vlasic who can cover up for him. I mean, that's
they'll do it on the second pair, or they'll do that third pair. Hey, we're gonna make you the third pairing top power play guy. I think that's a trend in the NHL because how play has to be 5-on-5 and just sort of make him, plug him in into different spots 5-on-5 where you don't think he's going to hurt you that much.
Yeah, no, Smith was the, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He was the 6th defenseman drafted in the first round. Dahlin, Hughes, Boquist, Bouchard, Dobson, and then Smith at 17.
Yeah.
I
would definitely take him over Boquist and, Bouchard and Smith. That's a good argument, actually, I think.
But you think Dobson was?
Oh yeah, he was my second rated guy. I mean, I think over time people are going to look back at that, and because I don't think they had a great handle on how good he was because he's not flashy, but he just does everything so well. And the fact that he could also add a lot of muscle, and he was already getting things done, not having that extra man strength. When he gets it, it's going to hit big. But like on my own rankings, I had Bouchard 9th and Smith 10th. I mean, that's how close I felt it was.
Now, switching to some of the RFAs, I know there's a little bit of talk about, because camps are getting close. It's the 20th of August. Most camps are opening the second week of September. I know Toronto and Buffalo are opening up. I think it's the 13th of September. And there are still a number of rather prominent restricted free agents. And, there's 17 RFAs unsigned right now, but if you pluck out what I think are the impact names, Noah Hannafin, Miles Wood, I can say, he had 18 goals last year, so I'll put him in that group. William Nylander of the Leafs, Sam Reinhart of the Sabres, Nick Ritchie of the Anaheim Ducks, Darnell Nurse, as we mentioned earlier, Shea Theodore from the Vegas Golden Knights, Josh Morrissey for Winnipeg. That's a pretty sizable list for August 20th. And I mean, I know with Toronto, a lot of the talk right now is whether it's going to be a bridge deal for Nylander or whether it's going to be a long-term deal. Nylander has indicated that he wants the long-term deal, but it depends on what he's asking for. And if he's asking for more than I think the Leafs think he's I'm sure they like what, if he think he's worth a lot, but if he's asking for over $7 million, I think that's going to end up being a bridge. Of those names, which one do you think is the likeliest to maybe hold out past the beginning of training camp?
I mean, if anybody was going to hold out, maybe Morrissey, but I don't think anybody's going to hold out. I think they're all just going to sign their bridge deals and move on with it. I don't know if any of them are getting – I mean, Darnell Nurse has the best case of all of them, but if they don't want to give him the long-term deal, I don't think he's going to hold out. Now, if there's a guy who has the most leverage to hold out, it'd be Darnell Nurse.
Right, because of Sekera.
Yeah.
Now, I think, and we've talked with Peter about this, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about it until Morrissey ends up signing his deal. I mean, there's a leverage situation there because of, Enstrom is gone. Trouba is another year closer to being a UFA. He's on a 1-year deal. I think they probably want to get him long term, but after scoring 26 points last year, he's probably going to want close to $5 million.
Right.
That's what most decent defensemen are looking for.
I think it's going to be the term on that.
Minor trade just announced by the Montreal Canadiens. Former Leaf, former Blue Jackets first round pick Kirby Reichel is on the move again. This will be his fourth club, and I think he's 22 or 23 years old.
Yeah.
Kirby Reichel has been traded to the Calgary Flames for winger Hunter Shinkaruk. This is the thing. I saw Kirby Reichel for, I believe, 2 seasons with the Marlies. He's got ability. He goes to those dirty areas. He's good along the wall. The problem is that I don't know whether he has NHL speed. That's been the drawback.
With both these guys.
Yeah.
That's why they're being swapped. And the problem is Reichel has a better chance of having an impact than Shinkaruk with that speed problem, because Shikaruk's only 5'10". I mean, that's why, you're seeing this swap. Everybody says, well, send the player to Barbara Underhill, but not everybody is going to gain speed, especially after their 20s. It just doesn't happen for everybody.
Right. And he's a big, I'm not saying he's a big guy. He's a big, tough guy. And, I think he probably maximized his skating ability, because he did work with the Leaf. Everybody works with Barb Underhill with the Leafs. And, if there wasn't any great improvement in his skating ability, then he probably is what he is. And he was included in the deal, the deal that I did not like from the Maple Leafs perspective, the deal sending him and Renat Valiev and a second round pick for Thomas Plekanec. And now Plekanec is back in Montreal, and Kirby Reichel is now with Calgary. Now, I mean,
if you want to set up Reichel in front of the net on the power play, you could get away with that and let him play a little fourth line. I think you can get more use out of Reichel than you can get out of Shinkaruk.
And he was the leading scorer for the Marlies, not last year, but the previous year. But that was because of a lot of call-ups and things of that nature. There was a lot of transition on that team, but he did play well for them. And, maybe he can make the NHL. If he makes the NHL, it's going to be as a fourth line winger. And I think he fits that. But everybody now seems to want their fourth line wingers to be speedy guys.
Right.
And I don't think he's ever going to be speedy. Now, in terms of the list.
And they're both unsigned RFAs, right? So,
right.
I'm not sure what the end game is here, unless they're both really going to sign them. We'll see.
Right. They're both qualified.
Yeah.
So they're still RFAs, and I think neither one were arbitration eligible. So, maybe in this instance, they both just take the qualifying offers and play out the year, get a year under their belt with their new teams and hope to make an impression. You think that's probably the case. Of the list that we were talking about, I agree Morrissey and maybe Nurse, but it sounds like Sam Reinhart, the Sabres want to get Reinhart on a 1 or 2 year a bridge deal. It sounds like Reinhart, I know that there was some reporting in Buffalo that, if Reinhart just took the qualifying offer, which I'd be a little surprised at because he did score 24 goals. I think he could get a 2-year deal or even a 1-year deal at over $1 million and, make a little more money. But if he puts up that kind of number again, I mean, this is a second overall pick. And I know he had a bad early part of the season with the Sabres, but he played very well in the second half. And I think now with Eichel, with Middlestat, they have some forwards sort of that are a better fit for like third line depth duty. Some of the guys they got from St. Louis that, if he permanently plays with Eichel or permanently plays with Middlestat, I think his numbers can increase. So maybe it's up to his benefit to get a 1-year deal at a little more than the qualifying offer and then just go forward from there.
Yeah, that's probably what will happen. And that's fine, because really they got more than they probably expected last year out of Reinhart. He bounced back, but they still are a team in flux in the sense that you don't know who's going to end up where, like you said, Middlestat and with other players like that. We don't know how much Okposo is going to play.
Right.
You don't hear anything out of Kyle Okposo. So
I think he. I mean, at the end of the season, he was. I mean, he was playing. So I think now, was he playing as effectively as he did with the Islanders?
That's what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if he's ever going to be that. The Sabres fans have to hope, because that was a long-term deal for a lot of money, and it's they're going to give him every opportunity to try to earn that money, but it's going to be tough.
He played a lot of games, but in 76 games, he had 44 points. Like that was not a good year for Kyle Okposo, considering both his years, 44, 45 points pales to the 60-point years that he had on the island. So
I don't think there's going to be a holdout in terms of William Nylander. I like I said, I think it's going to end up being a bridge deal, unless because you're sort of getting like the little bit of the indications, but I don't know if these are based on quotes from the Smash Fest event from earlier this month or anything new that's come out. But he said, I want a long-term deal, and the Leafs are practicing patience. So basically, you've got a little bit of a Swedish standoff here, I guess. and you're just seeing like, okay, well, he wants to get into camp. He doesn't want to be holding out. So the closer they get to camp, will his side will Louis Gross and his side come down a little bit and take, the equivalent of what David Pastrnak got on a 6-year deal? Or if he's asking for $7 million, then the Leafs will just say, okay, let's do a 2-year bridge and revisit this in a couple seasons. I, in the end, think it's going to be that, because I think they are pressing for more than Pastrnak. Yeah. After the Dylan Larkin deal, I think, he gets, 1 year of unrestricted free agency bought, and he gets over $6 million on a 5-year deal. And I know he's a center, but I think that sets a precedent that teams don't like.
Yeah, I agree. I think it does too. But I think he'll get a bridge, and I think he'll get more than, his fair share for that. And unfortunately, I think in the future he's going to get held out of a long-term deal with the Leafs. I just have that feeling.
Yeah, the one I think that could hold out, even though his new coach is his old coach from Carolina, is Hannafin, because I'm surprised that Hannafin hasn't signed yet.
I think they're going to get that done. I think that's going to be one where, because there's so many implications and there's tightness to the cap, it'll get done. But I don't know why it's taken this long either, but I imagine they're going over quite a few things.
Yeah, well, we'll keep an eye out on that, and I'm sure a lot of these names, news on them is going to break fairly soon. Now, Russ, you said you were talking about some of the pending UFAs, the guys who are entering the final years of their deals,
right?
Now, I mean, we and again, this is territory we talked about. Guys like Carlson, guys like Pacioretty. I mean, I know I had something about that late last week about Pacioretty possibly going somewhere. And
we all say, not we all, but because I haven't been saying it, but a lot of people say, well, they can't go back to their old teams. Well, right now it looks like some of them are.
Yeah, but it's gonna be uncomfortable.
Whatever. I mean, but I'm just saying, we're at a point now where we're a few weeks away. Unless there's significant progress made because of the types of players they are and what they're asking for, they're not dumping them. This is not a situation of Mike Hoffman. So
no,
players are going to be coming back.
This is the thing, and we mentioned this last week with Kevin, is that these general managers are going to have to come to grips with the fact that they're not going to get more than the rental price in late August and September. I think that the Skinner deal set the precedent. And again, I think, and sometimes people say to me, they go, well, comparables and precedent doesn't mean anything. Yes, it does, because general managers bring this up. And when you have a player with a year left, and I'm sure that Pacioretty is going to get more in return than what Carolina got for Jeff Skinner, because Pacioretty is a bigger player. He scored 30 goals more. He doesn't have as much, the concussion history that Skinner does. So it's maybe, some people perceive him as being less of a risk. But that deal, a winger making a certain amount of money 1 year away from unrestricted free agency, it sets a level that maybe they'll get a little more, but Montreal is not going to get much more than what Carolina got for Skinner. And that's more, I think they're still holding out. There was the talk about the LA Kings around draft time, before the draft. They wanted Gabe Velarde as part of the deal, and the Kings weren't going to do that. And that's where Montreal is. They want a linchpin prospect who can play in the NHL, and I don't think they're getting that.
Yeah, I probably not, but they're going to get something decent. Maybe it's going to be a compilation of picks and such. I don't know, but they're not going to ride it out. They have to get assets for,
Yeah.
They have to do it. So, but again, I think for whatever reason, he's still the guy that goes first, because Montreal is always the place where things get blown up to a point where I think they have to say, all right, let's do this. Where Erik Karlsson, look, there's no real pressure on Ottawa. There's no pressure for the team to be a Stanley Cup contender. Even though Montreal, we don't think will be anywhere close to that, doesn't mean the pressure is not there.
I think the
Montreal. So I think Karlsson goes back, and I think Pacioretty is the one that actually doesn't make it when the season starts. He gets traded.
I think the lack of comfort is the reason why that would be the impetus for Karlsson being moved. But I also think that the factor of them not having their own first round pick, and them wanting to be actually, have a good record. I mean, if they had their own first round pick, I think they would trade Karlsson and they'd be full force in the Jack Hughes sweepstakes. But because they don't have that pick, they're sort of like the Leafs from 20 some odd years ago, or more than that, close to 30 years ago, when they traded to add players to prevent them from finishing last overall, to not give up Eric Lindros. And that's the position that Ottawa's in. Now, if they can get back their first by trading Karlsson to Colorado, like we talked about last week, that's all fine and good. I don't think Joe Sakic is going to let them off the hook in that respect.
Right.
And the thing is, it's like, we're getting mixed signals about the Columbus players, about Bobrovsky and about Panarin. We've heard, that they were considering moving Panarin. Now we're hearing they probably aren't. I don't know if that means all year or if that means, till the deadline. But I think most of these guys, if they don't get signed, like Anders Lee and Panarin and Jake Gardiner, possibly, I have a bet with Kevin Allen on that one.
Yeah.
They could get traded. And like I said, I think it makes the trade deadline this upcoming February or March, it's going to make it pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be exciting. It's definitely, there's no question about that.
Now, all right, please put your questions in the chat if you have any questions about anything. Russ, strong on the draft, and me strong on everything else.
All right, let's see what we got here. Sifting through. Somebody did note that you have a new shirt, just so you know.
There you go. Yankees, baby. Yankees. Yes, to add to my Toronto Arena shirt. There you go.
Yes. All right. So Hunter asks, "Hey Russ, it seems like the NCAA is becoming more attractive to top prospects. I know you note the lower game count / lifting as pros. Okay. How would you rank the different development paths?" Well, like if you're one of these guys that, let's say you're still trying to break in, you go BCHL, then you go college, then you go NHL. If you're, maybe a little bit higher on the food chain prospect, you go, there's, USHL to college to the NHL. People are always going to say that the Canadian Hockey League's the better path, but I disagree because of the education. I think the value of education now has gone up so much that I think it surpasses what the stipend is for the CHL. And so I don't think either one means you get to be a pro any quicker. I really don't.
I think the benefit for the U.S. colleges for some of these players is the actual physical development, as you pointed out a number of times. Is they can
lifting part that he mentioned. Yeah.
Right. I mean, they eat well. They have facilities that they can build themselves up. And we're talking about, if these players stay in for 4 years. So they're coming out at 21 or 22 years old as a pretty much fully developed man.
Yeah.
Whereas,
remember the CHL didn't even have a rule until 2 years ago where they gave the players a certain amount to train with over the summer. Otherwise, it was all on them. Where you're hanging out on the college campus, you still have those guys there that could train you even in the off season.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, there are so many different paths to the NHL, and you really can't say one is better than the other because we've seen success. And we've seen players have success at all different ways. You've seen players come through the OHL or the Q or the WHL and go right into the NHL or have a year or two in the AHL, and they're star players. And you've had players who played 1 year in the NCAA, like Jack Eichel, and he steps in the NHL and scores over 20 goals. It's Will Butcher goes 4 years in the NCAA, and comes right out of the University of Denver, and I think was rightly one of the top 5 rookies in the NHL last year. There's all different ways, and players can come from the KHL.
Yeah, I mean KHL is the least of the ones that I would say though. But at the end of the day, I really do think like the best path is USHL to college to the NHL because it does give you a little bit more time to ripen on the vine, and I think changing leagues is good because then you've sort of graduated. You get to the next level. You're playing against some stronger, older guys when you get to college. I think still when you're playing in the USHL, there's a great amount of talent in the USHL now already. So I think that's good. Can you say there's better overall talent in the Canadian Hockey League? Sure, absolutely. But it's the education part that I'm always going to fall back on. All right, let's see. What happens if Edmonton misses the playoffs? Do they unload Draisaitl, Chia, and McClellan, considering moving McDavid? This is for Matt. McDavid will never get moved. Chiarelli could lose his job at that point. Absolutely.
I think that McClellan is on a short leash this year. If by the All-Star break,
lose his job mid-season.
Yeah, he could. If they're at the All-Star break and they're 10, 12 points out of a playoff spot. And McDavid hasn't been injured. I mean, if McDavid is injured or something like that, that's an excuse for that team not being successful because he's one of the best players in the league. But yeah, no, this is a make it or break it year for both Chiarelli and McClellan. And I'm not. I know there are people out there who are very optimistic about Edmonton. I don't see the reason for any change in fortune.
But there's no reason to ever unload a Draisaitl. He's a great player.
No, and they will never ever trade Connor McDavid. Never. If he leaves Edmonton, it's on his own volition. It's never going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's the way it could happen, and that's the only way it'll happen. Let's see. All right, so another one from Matt. It's a good question. That's why I'm letting him get in a second. At this point, with the Rangers defense being complete trash, I don't know if it's complete trash, why are we not looking to bring in Sabisa as a depth guy? Sabisa really is a guy that was rushed to the NHL by the Flyers. They included him in the Pronger trade. He's a great guy. Like I talk to him a lot when I see him. I really like Lucas Biza. He's got a role in the NHL. I don't think he would have a great role on the Rangers that's worth it to bring him in for any kind of money because you've got young developing defensemen. Why am I letting him take a spot? He's not that old, no, but he's not getting any better. So no, I think the defense is what it is. I think Brendan Smith is the only one who has a chance to get out of the doghouse and upgrade your defense. Let's see.
Of the defensemen who were not extended qualifying offers, that means they were RFAs that teams just walked away from. Spiza is the youngest defenseman who's a UFA at 28 years old. There's, Brandon Davidson and Jakob Bjerback and Victor.
But there's a reason Spiza's out there and no one's, clamoring. There is
Right, and then more than likely, some of these 30-plus guys like Emmelin, like Bieksa, like Josh Georges will get a crack before Spiza because everybody knows what Spiza is. I think he's probably, a 6'7" defenseman and probably will never be anything better than that.
People in Rangerland didn't like the turnovers from Michael Roosevelt. You're not going to want Spiza on your team. Right. Matt Everly asks, Russ, what do you think the ceiling is for Valery Shushkin? He's been in the KHL for a while, but he's extremely talented and could be a difference maker for the Stars if he's slept on. I think he can get 50 points, but I think he has to play top nine. You can't put him on a fourth line, but really for him to get 50, he has to get a fair amount of power play time too. But this is a guy who is big and is fast and highly skilled. So even if he's on a third line, let's say even someone like Dickinson makes it, who also is very fast, if he could just get some other fast line mates, I think the ice will open up for him. He knows how to get the space. And I think he could be in that second tier of Calder candidates, but I think he'd be like 6th, 7th best rookie this year or something like that.
Well, I don't think
he did play enough the first year.
Yeah, right. But no, I mean,
for young players. Sorry.
Right. And this is the thing. It's going to be interesting whether they put him with an aging Jason Spezza who can still be a playmaker.
Yeah.
Or if they play him with a Janmark, who maybe their future number 2 once Spezza leaves.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was me, I would put him with Ben and with Sagan. I would put him on the number 1 line because I think he's got the offensive ability and he's a I don't know if you can say he's a power forward because I don't think he's very aggressive, but he's big, he's speedy, he's got those big strides, he can drive to the net. If with the right line, I think he could score 30 goals, but I don't know if he's going to be able to, if he's going to play in that kind of position coming back. Depends on what Jim Montgomery thinks of him, but I think he's got a lot of talent. So I conservatively, I'd say 20 to 25 goals.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm just letting people know there will be no offer sheets. Offer sheets don't happen in the NHL anymore. Don't write about them. Don't ask about them because it's just a waste of our time.
Yes.
Another one from Matt Everly. Russ, besides, he means Gorton and Bergevin. Who are some of the other GMs that are low key in the hot seat around the league?
That's a good question.
I think Chaika still is in the hot seat because I think he's got his coach. They've been bringing in a lot of young talent.
He needs results.
I think they have to produce. I think Chaika has to produce this year. I do. I think so. I think there's some of that in Arizona. I know people probably think, well, it's Arizona. No, Arizona still has expectations. And I think at some point you have to look with all these young guys to actually do that.
I think Stan Bowman.
Well, I think we're only talking coaches, so it would be Quenneville.
No, I thought he was talking.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Where did my brain go? Yeah, Stan Bowman. I think he's still safe. You think he's on the hot seat? I
know that. I mean, we heard the Quenneville, rumors out there, and okay, he's staying this year, but I mean,
I don't think Bowman goes and Quenneville stays. I don't think that happens. I think they both go or they both stay.
Right, exactly. And I think that if they have another disappointing year, then I think they're both there's a odds on that they both go and they're looking for basically a new start in Chicago. And then if that happens, then you start to question whether one of Kane or Taves gets moved in the next few years.
Trying to think if there's really anybody else that I can come up with. Some people might say Armstrong. I don't think so. The same way, everybody always said Wilson, and I said no, Wilson's staying. Even Eck disagreed with me on that, and he was wrong.
I mean, does Jim Benning, after the ouster of Trevor Linden, is he now more in a comfortable position? Because
definitely it's more comfortable.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any worry there for Jim Benning. I think it's definitely more comfortable for him.
Yeah, I mean that's
Bradshaw Living may be the other one because I think there is a bit of a short leash on what's going on in Calgary, and I think they've tried this quick fix now. And if that were to fail, which I don't think it will, but if it does, Bradshaw Living could be another thing.
I don't know if he will be, but who should be on the who should be in trouble if things don't work out this year is Rob Blake. Because if he signs Gaborik, a 35-year-old, he trades for Dion Phaneuf, and you've got all this plus 30 players that are there, and they fall apart, and they don't make the playoffs, and they don't do what apparently, he's going for let's go for the next 1 or 2 years while we have Kopitar and Doughty still young enough to be the leaders. And if that doesn't work, if they miss the playoffs, then I think he should be in trouble, because that's a strategy that really is fraught with peril.
No, I think that management team's set for a while. I don't think there's any trouble there. All right,
I think you're right, but what I'm saying is they are probably set. They probably are safe, but they should be in trouble if this strategy if it fails.
Okay, well we'll see. I mean, we'll see that down the line. Steve James asks, and this is really for you first. What do you think if the Leafs tried Connor Brown with Morgan Riley on the first D pairing? Connor
Carrick, you probably mean.
Carrick.
No.
Oh, no. He said, yes, I went there. Has there ever been a successful forward and a switch and be successul?
No, there's been
There's
been the other way, right? But he didn't do it permanently. There's been the other way around. Defenseman.
The only one I could come up with that worked, and we all looked at that at the time and said,
Sammy Kapanen played defense at times.
Yeah, but very little.
Very little.
Not as much as Fedorov. Kapanen played like a little bit here, a little bit there with Philly.
Right.
But Fedorov played a lot. And Fedorov was just as dynamic defensively with the puck as he was offensively. But that is a rare thing. Like that's like a two-sport athlete. Like
see, that's the thing. It's like just because in the past, over 50 years ago, Red Kelly transitioned from defense to center does not mean that every defenseman, and the thing is, Red Kelly was a Hall of Fame defenseman if he'd never played a game at center, and he was a great defenseman, defensively and offensively. Just because Al Iafrate can't play defense, let's put him on the wing. Just because Jake Gardner struggles in his own zone, let's move him up to forward. Phil Housley in Buffalo played center between Gilbert Perreault and Mike Foligno for a time. It doesn't work.
Brought up, but it's like it's a different era, guys.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
It's an era of specialization. These things don't happen, won't happen. So I don't think we see it anymore. Housley was an exceptional offensive defenseman. He was.
Yes.
And so that's something where, yes, you could see that happening. Like I said, I've mentioned Ron Greshner when he got moved to the wing, still at 24 goals as a winger. And that was out of need. It wasn't because they wanted to make a switch. They just needed a guy to do it, and he was the guy with the most offensive ability on the blue line that could do it. No team wants to do that anymore.
Yeah, defensemen are so valuable right now that they do not want to move them to a position that's less valuable. They want to make it work and have them be whatever they can be on defense at the blue line, because their value, even if they're a flawed player, they're playing on the blue line. And look at just the salaries of defensemen now, and how that connotes how valuable they are.
Even in baseball, like Rick Ankiel, it didn't work out for him when he switched and became a hitter.
And that was a success story because he actually stayed in the major leagues as a hitter for a while.
I know. But overall, it didn't work out.
No, it didn't.
That's it.
That's it? Okay. Good show.
Drew, I don't know what Drew's getting at here. He wrote Gardner mentioned. I don't know what that means.
Oh, because remember from last week, don't mention Jake Gardner. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we mentioned Jake Gardner. Sorry. It's time. The drinking contest. I'm drinking. There you go. This is gin on the rocks. For Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.